I'm Dr. Bart Rademaker, and this is the Doctor's Guide podcast, raw and unfiltered. And once again, bringing to you the insights and the action steps that you're going to want to take to help you optimize your health, whatever situation you actually have. But one of the things that I've recognized as a physician, plastic and reconstructive surgeon for the last 25 years, I trained for 17 years, that the information on the internet is just quite overwhelming. And the truth is that with so much content, a lot of it's really good, but not everything is that great. And some of it's certainly not good at all. But the question is, how do you discern that? And then even more importantly, is it, context dependent for your particular case? The truth is that a certain product or service might be great for one person, but not for you and might actually cause adverse reactions. So the point of this podcast, the Doctor's Guide, is to curate and educate and guide you through sharing a process rather than selling a product like most podcasts will be doing. And then you're spending all this money on stuff that actually doesn't work. But helping you understand the process by which you can make a better decision for yourself. And how do we do that? Well, I've got these amazing guests that have so much wisdom and magic and insight to share with you. And we do that through a role play. And so it's a short role play for about 6 or 8 minutes. Sometimes people get triggered by this role play, and that's great because that means there's something within you that needs to be, addressed. And the idea is that you get to witness yourself in that process of a problem towards a resolution, giving you hope and clarity as to what it is that you need to do next. And after the role play, what we'll do is we'll unpack some of that information. And again, giving you the insights and action steps that you can take if it's appropriate for you. So before we do that, I'll have each of my guests introduce themselves for about a minute, and then we'll dive into the role play. And then on the other side, we'll do the unpacking. So Peter, please introduce yourself, especially this amazing product that you have, which I absolutely love. And it's a breakthrough in bone health. And then we'll go with Michele.
That sounds great. Well, my name is Pete Simonson, and I am a self-described health engineer. I'm not a doctor, and I don't have that skill set, but my role is to really work 10 to 20 years ahead of the doctors, identify solutions, and make them usable for the doctors to then use. So I've become an expert in the small, and the doctors tend to be generalists and know the whole picture. And that's really what you need for a patient. That's not me. However, what I do find myself doing is having to innovate and find myself ahead of the curve. And that can be a lonely place sometimes. And I have done this in spinal implant systems. I've done it with starting what now are called functional medicine clinics. I was doing that about 12 years ago. And now I'm currently working on a product called Juvent, Juvent. And it's a project that I adopted. I did not invent. I've invented a lot of things. And I'd like to point out that this is not my invention. But I picked up the ball where a really talented team had dropped it. And we started using it for osteoporosis, but have since found that was just the tip of the iceberg. And that's where the story gets really interesting. And that'll be part of our topic today.
Yeah, awesome. What I love about the kind of work that you do is you're giving us tools to access the potential of the body to restore form and function in the ways that we couldn't even imagine 20, 30 years ago. And so the kind of work, I love this term, health engineer. We need a lot of people like you, Peter. Michele, brief introduction about yourself, and then we'll jump into the role play.
Yes, I've been a nurse since the 1980s, and I was a high-risk OB nurse who left the profession to homeschool my 6 kids. I have 3 biological and 3 adopted kids, various shades of black and brown. And so I started being a little bit different in society by that way. And then by being a homeschooler was a subculture kind of person, grinding my wheat, making my bread, that kind of thing. And I was homeschooling for 29 years, graduated 5 of the 6 out, and have 1 to go. But in 2020, my whole crew ended up with COVID, and everybody else was shooting basketball by day 3, and I decided to video blog the whole thing. And I was the unfortunate person who ended up in the COVID unit on day 5 and the hospital on day 5 and day 10. And Nurse Michele was activated to being aware that there was something very serious going on in our society, and the policies and protocols were the problem. And I was awakened to the need for publishing some very important things to help people learn how to survive COVID and keep you out of the hospital. And it ended up going worldwide and got quite popular. And now I'm on talk radio, getting the news of the people of what happened in 2020, exposing the truth and trying to speak truth without fear about that, and offering solutions for people to know that there are things you can do natural that you can do at home. And if you just have what you need at home, no matter what comes our way, upper respiratory, we can tackle it and we can take care of it. And it took to more than half of 100 years old to learn that suffering can be turned into ways to be on a mission to help others.
I love all that. And, truth be told, and sometimes it's hard for people to understand the truth, largely because of fear and not necessarily being able to know or discern if what someone is telling them is the truth or not. We live in a world where certainty is so uncertain nowadays. It's kind of hard to navigate. But the one thing that I'm a very strong proponent of, and that is this, and that was my vision, when I started my practice, and it's twofold, is that the question that we should ask: how do we harness the potential of the body to restore form and function, which is why I like what Peter is doing. But the other part is that my vision of the future doctor is that he won't be prescribing drugs or performing surgery. So this may not be a fun fact, for many people, but the reality is that we've got so much information nowadays. We've got people like yourselves that help us optimize our health in the most natural process. But we'll talk more about that later on. So, Michele, you are presenting with a problem, about 6 minutes, and then I'll give you a 1 minute warning if I need to. So go ahead.
Okay, so I'm trying to do my best life out there, trying to enjoy nature, and I'm canoeing. And I get out on a rock and I slip and break a bone for the first time in my life and bust it right on the middle of an island. And in an attempt to be canoed back to safety, my family attempting to get me out of the boat even broke a rib. And I end up in emergency surgery in a state that had a lot of different policies. And this was in October of 23. So I am not a very inactive person. So this was a very big deal to have that happen to me. And I was at a medical conference about 5 weeks post-op and managing pain pretty well with no Tylenol or anything like that, just using some miracle gel, as I called it. And I left it. I left it at a hotel. And I was at a medical conference in a bit of a peril situation because I knew I was not going to be back for 16 hours and needed help coping with that pain. And most importantly about this is that I was a osteoporosis patient since I was 40 years old due to a disease that's called primary hyperparathyroidism. Very rare. Not many doctors know how to help you. And so all the doctors that ever offered me was drugs and no hope. And all the drugs have major issues. And I was trying to forward my own path, hoping I was going to find some new option. And then I end up unfortunate enough to break a bone. So in breaking that bone, I was pretty much in the surgery world of facing nothing but more surgeries. And then I was at a medical networking event and somebody saw me walking with a walker while I was trying to navigate the place without tripping on wires. And that person said, I think I might have something that could help you. And that was Peter. So.
Well, take it away, Peter.
Well, that's true. I was at a medical conference in Phoenix, and it was it was kind of a gathering of the quote fringe of the doctors who didn't quite drink the Kool-Aid for their COVID epidemic. And that was one of the main themes of it. But there was also a lot of other therapies that were being shared that aren't quite the norm. But part of that, I looked over and saw Michele in this walker, and I didn't know whether that was a permanent thing, a trauma, or a condition. But it's one of those things that when you see somebody and you can help them, you just have to ask, and just because it's probably worth it. And sure enough, I found out she had a traumatic fracture in her hip. And that's something that I know in the past, Juvent helps many, many patients in fracture healing, expedite fracture healing. And so I just was compelled to share with her. I said, I think this is something you really should do, because nobody likes to be on a walker. and lose their mobility. And if you can expedite that process, then hey, that's your first base hit. But as I've always found, people get on adjuvant for one reason. In this case, it might be a fracture, but they stay on it for a dozen reasons they wouldn't even think are related. And that's where it starts to get fun. The key word is skeletal metabolism.
Yeah, hearing his presentation about what the bone, because I'm a nurse, I think I know what bone is. But if nothing was learned in 2020, it was, you don't know anything. And you think the medical community knows something, and they certainly don't have a lot of solutions for you in their wheelhouse. So the first experience I got on that Jovent, I kind of felt a sense of pleasure kind of go all the way through my body, honestly. And it was very pleasant. But a week after I met him, I was back home in Georgia, and my orthopedic surgeon said to me, "I've got some bad news for you. Your screws are coming out, and your neck of your femur is crushing on the head of your femur. Your head of your femur is going to die in avascular necrosis. And about 9 months from now, you're going to end up with a hip replacement surgery." And I said, "Oh no, we're going to do plan B. That's not happening." And he says, "Oh no, there is no plan B." I said, "Oh, I just met somebody that has a miracle product, and I'm going to be jumping on that thing, and we'll see about that." So that Juvent came, and I've been on it ever since. So I will tell you, I'm about 26 or 28 weeks post-op right now. And I just came into the surgeon's office at 24 weeks post-op, and he just happened to be walking out in the hall when I came out, and I had on boots and I had on my regular clothes, no walker, no cane. And by the way, well, I won't go there. So anyways, he sees me, and I saw him do a double take on it. And I thought, oh yeah, you see, I'm not using a cane right now. So I went to my room, and he came in, and he said to me, this man who told me I was going to have, hip replacement surgery, he said, "Your screws are not coming out. They haven't moved. Your bone looks solid. Your femur head looks perfectly round. And I just saw you walking like a woman normal down the hall, and you don't need me. You call me if you have a problem." I said, "Well, let's just remember what you said to me, not too long ago. And you didn't give me much hope, and nothing, didn't give me anything to offer, nothing to help me." And I said, "Don't you forget what I gave you about this product that I've been standing on, because it worked. If you're saying this good thing is helping me." So that was one perk. But I was just telling Peter, there was a surprising perk that I didn't even notice, because I was told in my 30s that I had degenerative arthritis and rheumatoid arthritis. And I was in a lot of pain in my 30s. And it's really tough to be a young woman in pain, because you present to doctors, and the medical community just can't hear you for some reason. All they can just see you. And I was offered narcotics and everything. And thank goodness I was smart enough to say no to those kind of things. They didn't have solutions for me. So it's a downhill slide for that kind of diagnosis. I pretty much inherited everything my dad has. And I didn't see that there was much hope. So stairs weren't part of my life, and I had to avoid them and had to calculate when I was going to do stairs. And I just had this last week, I just dashed up my stairs and went and got, because my kids know I'm never going to come up there and inspect anything until a certain day because of the stairs. And I'm dashing up there, and it dawned on me, I'm like, oh my gosh, I just dashed up there like nothing. And then I was at my mom's, and she was right behind me. She's a 77-year-old woman, much more fit than me. And she came dashing behind me, and she's like, "Michele, you have never been able to do that." And I can't even begin to tell you how big a deal that is, because I mean, I'm on it for a broken hip, but I know the science of it because he's taught me the science of it. But I feel like I'm living it right now, because I'm talking about doctors who said to me, "You have no hope, but knee replacement in your future. When you can't take the pain anymore, you'll be back here." And I'm like, "Oh no, I'm going to find something else. I'm not coming back to you." And I didn't know when that help was going to come. And I think that standing on this Juvent is there's more that it's doing. It's not just doing that. I mean, there's an overall general feeling of wellness that's happening, maybe because it does have that stem cell release benefit that's going on, that when you have genesis cells bouncing through your body, maybe that makes you feel a little good. So.
Right. Well, thank you for that lengthy share. That's amazing. I'd like to ask Peter, but before I do that, one of the things that we find, unfortunately, and that is this, is that as as for medical training, because there is so much information. And it just seems that everything is becoming even more hyper specialized, which causes the docs, my colleagues out there, to become even more myopic. And why? Because, the amount of information is just way too much. And the only way to be able to handle that is to become more super specialized. But then, of course, you're missing out on everything else that's around it. And so that's the challenge that I think many of my colleagues have out there, that they're also not ready to be open to all these other things that people like Peter are bringing up to the forefront. And that's a big challenge. And so the conversation, the reason for this podcast is indeed to address the responsibility of acquiring or being open to that new information, but also more importantly for the consumer to be accountable for finding what else is available out there. And I know that's not really easy, but that's also the purpose of this podcast, because at the end of the day, there are so many technologies out there like the Juven that are amazing, that will impart many wellness benefits. And my choice would be, how do we harness the potential of the body to restore form and function? And that's exactly what this does. So like to give the mic over to you, Peter, and more specifically, having people to hear, what this actually does, how it benefits, and then we'll go back to Michele with any more thoughts that she has about her experience.
Sure. It's interesting. Michele may remember this, and I told her when we first met, I said, in the large sense, this accident is a blessing in disguise, because if it gets you on a Juven, the effects will be far greater than your accident recovery. In my observations, this is just Pete's opinion, I'm not quoting a study, I've been working with Juven now for about 12 years. I see people's activity and lifespan, just activity span, increase. And my rule of thumb is it would add 5 years to somebody's active lifespan. And I could give you hundreds of examples of that, including my own mother. But what the hell's going on to make that claim? And it finally, after looking at this for many, many years, and I realized that Juven is supplying a fundamental daily requirement. Now, that is very, very rare territory. The last vitamin discovery was in the 30s. So excuse me, 1940s. So this is really quite literally a vitamin of exercise. And I have actually coined a new term to make it, because it needs one, new science needs a new word. I call it a vitakin, a vital kinetic. The word vitamin was originally a vital amino. Fast forward, that's where we get the term vitamin. But I realized this is a daily essential, but it's kinetic, not chemical. So the term vitakin fits. And I've given that talk to many PhDs, MDs, everyone agrees. So I'll use that from henceforth. But it really brings up, when applying that, it brings up something, Dr. Rademaker, that you brought up, is how does a specialist remember everything? And in this case, you almost have to take a step backward, because one of the gross oversights of physicians is they're trying to apply technologies and treatments and drugs and chemicals before addressing deficiencies. And so I think if you really had to nail what's functional medicine, it's really, the way I look at it, is two things: address deficiencies and remove toxins. And that's foundational. And in a part of my training, I have a slide with 12 indications. All of them can be treated pharmacologically. Right. And it's kind of a clever, a useful joke. The next to it is a glass of water. It's dehydration. These are the symptoms. The point is, can you imagine getting all these treatments and no doctor ever saying, do you drink water? And so yep. Juven with the vitakin is almost that foundational. If you look at chemically, we need fat, air, water, and food, fat, proteins, carbs. Well, this is right on that par. And so this has actually been a challenge for me to Well, it's really not a challenge anymore now that I've identified it, because as a doctor, they're used to looking at drugs, mechanisms of action, side effects, outcomes. But when you're dealing with something that's a fundamental daily requirement that affects the second most important organ system in the body, you're going to have systemic changes. And so, and I can give an hour-long talk on that. We can dive in as needed, but that's really where this fits. And it really needs to fit in a broader sense of doctors thinking a little differently. Don't worry about majoring on the micros, major on the obvious. Address deficiencies, remove toxins, and then treat what's left over.
No, you're speaking my language, absolutely, Peter. And it's, I would say almost comical, right? And I'd say that with tongue in cheek, of course, because I'm a doctor and I can say that, to have you educate me on something like that, that's actually quite obvious. Well, fortunately, I already knew that many years ago, but you are right. And so that's actually part of my mission, is to help my colleagues out there understand that we need to begin to look at things differently, because the health crisis that we have today, orthopedics as being one of the major ones, is a severe drain on everything, every aspect of life, economy, country, politics, whatever you have. And so, optimizing that health through some basic things like this vitakin, I love that term. I'm going to start using it like crazy and give you credit for that term all the time. And hopefully it'll be part of the Oxford Dictionary or the Webster Dictionary within the next 5-10 years. The point of the matter is, you are absolutely right. But in my job, again, is to help doctors reimagine the business of medicine and begin to have an awareness and a method or pathway to get access to your kinds of technologies. So that's definitely in the works. Michele, so as a patient, right? And I believe you're also a patient advocate. What would you want to tell people based on your kind of experience in general terms, perhaps, or even specifically for Juven?
Oh yeah, I mean, Juven even translates over to my endocrinologist saying to me that I'm going to have to get on these major drugs like Fosamax and Prelio. And I said, have you not changed your story in 12 years? That's what you told me 12 years ago. And you didn't even tell me to walk extra. How about a new plan? And while I was talking to him, a diabetic patient, a nurse was talking to him about a diabetic patient whose foot was about to have to be amputated due to significant decline. And Peter had just told me about a very beautiful success story of a person just like that who had great success. So that was he came back in. I said, too bad I heard that. I said, I've got something for that person out there that is an amputation and you need to listen to me. So I told him about that. And this man's known me since my first kidney stone in my 20s. That was actually the disease that they did not look into, the parathyroid disease. I would have kidney stones every 6 weeks from my 20s until my 50s. And nobody ever tested my PTH. Okay, so what does that say to us as a nurse and as a patient? You are your own best advocate, and you need to be being informed about what can help you, and you've got to advocate for yourself. And if you can't advocate for yourself, you need to get access to patient advocates and employ them to be with you in the hospital setting. Because if you're unconscious, you're not going to have anybody to speak for you. You're going to need somebody who can speak for you, not that just loves you. Because it's not enough to just love somebody if you don't know anything medical. You've got to have some knowledge, somebody nearby to help you. So I think that's it. And the reason Peter and I came to know each other is because not only did I have a hip injury, that my kid said, Mom, do you think this was a path to slow down, that God was telling you to slow down? I said, oh, no. He was opening up all kinds of wonderful opportunities for me. That's all that was happening there. So I look at it that way as far as the hip injury. But the reality is that COVID woke up a lot of the medical community to realize that it's obvious, like he was just saying about the water, like like maybe you need water, how simple that could be. How simple it was for a respiratory infection that hit the world to just deal with it with what we already knew helped respiratory infections, like nebulization, nasopharyngeal sanitation, budesonide that's been around forever. But no, that's not what happened. Instead, we had to complicate it and tell the world that it could not be treated when everything about nasal oral problems can be treated. So it was really about failing to educate. educate people.
And that's ultimately what it is, right? And again, when we have people like yourselves, who are willing and have the courage to speak their truth, and we may not always be right, and that's fine. But the point of the matter is that, and this is why we have this podcast, by the way, is just to have those kinds of conversations that you normally don't have on all these other podcasts. And it's really up to the listener to discern, okay, do I believe in this? Is this right for me? You know, am I going to move forward or not? And that's, you know, the freedom that everybody has. So on this podcast, you know, we're never making any claims, you know, we're not making any, you know, recommendations. However, sharing with you that process by which, you know, people have experienced their own challenges like you have. And as Peter has seen so many times, it's really about sharing that so that people become more aware and awake and realize, you know what, there is hope for me. Because when you look at it, I mean, 1/5 of our GDP is actually spent on healthcare, of which 90% is chronic illness and mental health, which, you know, last time I checked, are all predictable and preventable. And so, again, this might trigger some people, but I love to say that we no longer have an excuse to be sick. I couldn't have said this 5 years ago, but nowadays, you know, with all the information out there, with all the people like yourselves, with the technology, you know, that information is out there. Is it easy to get access to? Not necessarily. Is it always affordable? Not always, but most of it is. And so again, it's about connecting with the right people, stacking up different types of approaches together, doctors assuming responsibility, as you know, Peter was alluding to, being more open to seeing what else is available out there. And then my job is to make it a lot easier for everyone. So first, thank you, Peter, for today. Like to have you share how people get a hold of you, anything else that's present for you, and any final words from you as well.
Sure. I guess first things first, you can reach me at, go to our website at juvent.com, juvent.com. But, you know, the one thing I'd like to encourage people to remember is you can do a lot for yourself. You're not powerless anymore. I have one of my orthopedic surgeons had a coffee mug that he was very proud of, and it said, don't mistake your Google search for my 20 years clinical experience. No, and that's cute. That's fun. But the other way around is don't mistake your 20 years experience for Google and the internet. I mean, just reverse that a little bit. Because remember, you're one patient with one indication or disease or sickness. Okay. Your doctor has 1,000 patients and 100 diseases to deal with. You can't know everything. But if you have a disease or you have a condition and you have time, you have at your fingertips the same resources they do.
Yep.
And you can become an expert on that disease and you are inherently an expert on you. And remember, there's 3 reasons why drugs need clinical studies and trials. High risk, you don't want to do anything risky. High cost, you don't want to spend a fortune on wasting your time and energy. And displacement of a known therapy. So don't give up something that has a 50% success rate for something that has a 25% success rate. Okay? Just remember, there's a lot of treatments out there that none of that applies. And if it works, it works. And if we don't understand everything, we don't understand everything. We don't understand sleep. Just
Right.
remember, we're still doing studies on sleep, but we know we need it. And so my point is be empowered. Your doctor is a doctor of medicine. And Andrew Saul, he had an amazing quote. I got to give him credit for it. He said, they are what they say they are. They're doctors of medicine. They are not doctors of health. They can be a very powerful, wonderful resource in areas we don't know, but they don't know everything. And health is way bigger than just medicine. That can be diet, this is the whole world. So my point is, you're not powerless. Learn on your own your condition, learn the way out of it. And man, there's a lot of people out there to help you. And don't underestimate anecdotal. The world is built on anecdotal. Okay.
So
because go ahead.
no, go ahead. I thought you were up.
I love the way that is used as a pejorative against everything. And there's a beautiful paper that I'll share with you. This guy showed that there's no clinical trial showing a parachute works. So my
That's great.
point is, there's things we can use common sense. And if, again, we don't have those three factors I mentioned, don't be afraid. Explore it, learn it, talk. There's groups and people. And so either way, we're here to help. We're at Juvent, and we help in every way we can. And we like the doctors. They're a powerful tool, but there are other tools out there. That would be my message.
Yeah, bottom line is trust but verify, as infamous words of Ronald Reagan many years
Sure.
ago. And then the other part, obviously, and you're quite on point on that, and that is doctors don't have all the information, and they're expected to have all the answers, and it really puts them in a pickle. And so, no disrespect and no criticism of them, but the reality is that as a consumer of health, it's our responsibility to also do the homework. It's our responsibility also to do the work. And in that, you can reach out to your own doctor who potentially is the most qualified person to be able to curate and educate you on a particular product. Now, the challenge is that they don't always have that time or bandwidth to do that. So it's important for you to find the right person that will guide you. My hope is ultimately that the most qualified people, which are the doctors who have that education and the acumen, that will have the wherewithal to begin to collaborate with all the other amazing people like Michele, like you, to be able to discern, what products are great for them or not. And I honestly would love to see your product in every doctor's office, because so many people just have to wait, right? So you might as well be waiting on a Juvent. Michele, final words from you, and how do people get a hold of you?
Okay, so you can get a hold of me through advocacywithmichele.com, and I'm Michele with one L. And I'm also on AmericaOutloud.news at Nurses Out Loud, anywhere you listen to podcasts, Nurses Out Loud, and you can reach out to us on any of those platforms. But as far as, tagging on to what he just said, the fact that COVID has woken us up to the reality that I am the medical profession. I'm in the nursing profession. I know what we do not know. And my first show on my radio station was 20 vaccine questions for medical professionals. And I don't give them a single answer in the first episode. I tell them, and you can't Google anything because everybody thinks you know it already because you have a white coat. So they have to get the answers in the second session. And I've never met in 6 years a single medical professional who knows the answers. So what we have to do as a people is recognize that the white coats do not have all the answers. I just graduated a daughter out of nursing school, and she is quite aware of what they did not prepare them for, because the real world is completely different. I sit before the audience as a person with 15 medical diagnoses. I have multiple sclerosis. I'm a previous stroke patient. I have a significant blood clotting disorder. And I am telling you with a smile on my face that it is by my own effort and the grace of God directing me to people who actually can help me, that I am actually here today. It is up to you to educate yourself. And my awareness of that is that, as a patient advocate, and any nurses listening, is that it is your job to educate the patients and to make sure they can make informed decisions. And if you don't know anything about what you're talking about, you are not qualified. So I'm helping people to become better educated about the simple things that they can do that once upon a time great grandmas maybe used to give down and pass down to generations. But the world did change post World War II, and women's roles changed. And a lot of philosophy contributed to why it happened. And we need to get back to teaching people and teaching generations how to just do the simple things and how to be prepared. And don't think that the answer is at the bottom of the bottle, because the answer is not there. It's just going to get you. I think every 60-year-old, majority of 60-year-olds are on 20 meds. Let's change that. There's solutions that are natural.
And like Peter was saying, that a lot of it has to do with common sense. And when you look at people who live in the blue zones, their common sense is they live happy lives, they in relationships, they exercise a lot, they eat healthy, and a whole bunch of other things. And none of it has to do with drugs. I want to thank you both. Thank you for those amazing shares and those insights. Very, very, very helpful. And I look forward to our next show together. My name is Dr. Bart Rademaker, and this is the Doctor's Guide Podcast, raw and unfiltered, bringing to you the information that you're going to want to have to help you decide, how to best optimize your health. Once again, these aren't specific recommendations. It's up to you to assume that responsibility and accountability together with the people that you can trust that will also verify the information that they're giving to you is also reliable as well. So thank you both, and we will be back.